Hi BookTube, it's Amy. I'm here for my Friday/Saturday reads. This is my Friday reads, but it's on Saturday because I never did get around to filming either Thursday night or yesterday. So I thought I would pop in here and talk about what I read in the previous week. So first off, I am more than halfway done with Stacy Schiff's biography of Cleopatra. I took the dust jacket off here to read it, as I typically do with books that have dust jackets, and I have to say I'm quite enjoying this one so far. I really didn't know anything about Cleopatra. I had no idea that she had romantic relationships with both Caesar and Mark Antony, and that she had children with both of them. I've just gotten to the point in her life where she's given birth to twins who are the children of Mark Antony, and he has come back to Egypt to meet his children, and they are, I guess, having some good years together. Definitely a very good biography, very accessible, very engaging writing style, something that I'm quite enjoying. And sometimes you almost forget that you're reading about someone who lived so long ago and that we really know a very small amount about. And Schiff really has a challenge because she is sifting through various accounts of Cleopatra and determining, what we can trust, who actually knew what they were talking about, what motivations the writers might have had. A lot of Roman writers, I guess, would have had differing motivations than perhaps someone from Cleopatra's own society would have when they were writing about her, which is how she came to be portrayed really as someone who was seductive and someone who was promiscuous, rather than, as Schiff suggests, the political savvy ruler that she was. And she definitely had a flair for drama, for big theatrical entrances and for parties, which makes her very interesting to read about as well. And Cicero, I had no idea what kind of person Cicero was, and Cicero, I guess, wrote a big piece of her history and how we come to know her. And I guess he wasn't a big fan of her. And I didn't know a lot about Cicero either, so I'd be interested to read more about Cicero when I finish this. So I'm reading that. I also read Louisa May Alcott's novel, The Inheritance, which was one of her earlier works that was not published in her lifetime. She wrote it at the age of 17, and it's quite a overdramatic, almost melodramatic novel about a young woman who realizes that her benefactors are in fact related to her and that she is actually coming into a massive inheritance. But she is a ridiculously virtuous young woman who decides to set aside that inheritance in the name of virtue, I guess. So it's a really absurd novel. We have absurd situations like people falling over cliffs and sort of these gothic scenes where people are playing pianos in dark rooms and people are falling in love and whatnot. Definitely a little bit of a different flavor from Alcott's other works. I guess something I would maybe recommend if you're interested in reading some of Alcott's other works apart from Little Women, but definitely not one of the best things ever published in the English language. I also read Beyond Belief by Jenna Miscavige Hill, written with Lisa Pulitzer. My Secret Life Inside Scientology and My Harrowing Escape. So this memoir was okay. I didn't really know much about the Church of Scientology. Definitely a very very odd religious cult. It dragged a little bit in spots because she did very much go into detail about what the day-to-day was like growing up in this church in, I guess I would call it a boarding school. She refers to it as a educational camp. From a young age, her parents were sort of upper level in the Church of Scientology, and she was sent off away from them. The kids were separated from their parents, and they had this kind of bizarre educational facility that was sort of like a summer camp, only with hard physical labor in the morning and not very effective lessons in the afternoons. In fact, they didn't really have proper teachers or proper subject matter. Instead, they were going through these lesson plans, and there were these weird ideas about if you're unable to answer a question about something, it's because you came across a word that you didn't understand and continued to read. So any failures are seen as sort of moral failures because you had the audacity to skim over something that you didn't understand or a word that you didn't understand. And she sort of navigated this strange structure, a structure that was constantly changing as leadership changed. There are these weird sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but I can't even remember the word they used, but it was some sort of electronic device that was supposed to read your moods to tell whether you were lying or guilty about something. And if you had certain frequencies, then clearly you were in the wrong. And if you had other frequencies, then you were sort of pure and morally sound. And so she is recounting being in this camp-like school, being separated from her parents, and her growth into adulthood, and of course her final decision to escape the Church of Scientology. Not something I greatly enjoyed, but I guess an interesting book overall. As I said, it did drag in some parts where she was recounting, these mundane day-to-day aspects of her life and the various courses that she was taking. I also read A Mountain of Crumbs by Elena Gorkova. This one I enjoyed fairly well, although I expected it to be something more than it was. When you hear that you're reading a memoir about a woman who grew up in Soviet Russia and left, you expect her to be someone, I guess, more remarkable, but really she was just, an everyday person who grew up in Soviet Russia, learned English, married an American, and moved to the States. There were some interesting anecdotes about her mother during the Second World War and about her Russian schools that she went to. But I wasn't too thrilled with this one either. It was all right. It was interesting. It passed the time. But I would have been far more interested in learning more about what her life was like once she got to the States, because she sort of follows her life up until the moment when she leaves and moves to the States. And then, she's sort of done. She skips ahead and recounts how her mother is there now, but we don't learn anything about what it was like to adjust to a new country and a new culture. And I guess, some of the most interesting parts, we didn't get very much detail on, such as her older sister who became an actress. I think that would have been a far more interesting story to read rather than the story of a woman who learned English and decided to just change countries. I did think the discussion of marriage was very interesting. Marriage removed from the religious trappings that we often have in various cultures. Just going to an office to sign a paper and get married. In fact, her mother was married 3 times in her life, and it was done fairly easily. And then, of course, her own marriage, where it was all about paperwork and all about waiting to marry a non-Soviet citizen. And yeah, I guess it was okay. As I said, I would have liked to hear more about her sister. So there's her sister in her first film role, and I think that would have been a far more interesting story, because when it comes down to it, I don't know why we're reading about Elena. She doesn't seem to have done anything remarkable, and I get that memoirs are often about everyday people, but this was a little bit too everyday for my taste. Then I read, last weekend as well, I read The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. This is a buddy read with Janelle from All the World's a Page, and we have yet to talk about it, so I'll leave my comments here to a minimum in case she watches this. But this is historical fiction about several women who sort of dealt with the tumultuous war period at the fall of, I think it was the Second Temple in Jerusalem. And so we have a baker's wife, we have the daughter of a woman who died in childbirth and who is despised by her father. And this particular woman has bright red hair, which is very unusual. And we also have a grandmother who is sort of described as being a witch in some ways. And they all sort of converge on this city, on this fortress, where everybody who has fled the city is sort of hiding out, waiting for this war, this siege to end. And the main characters all end up being dove keepers. So they are looking after these doves, and they are collecting the waste of the doves to fertilize the fields. I enjoyed it. Definitely not something I would normally read, but it was fast-paced, it was interesting, it was gripping. Definitely a novel that I would recommend. So there was that. So that is the books that I got through in the last week. I'm going to finish this biography of Cleopatra. I did read one chapter of a biography of Nelson Mandela. I'll continue on with that. And then I'm not sure what I'm going to pick up from there. I have plenty of choices. Not much else to do this weekend, so just continuing on with reading. I hope that everybody is doing well and staying well, and I hope that you're getting out for some fresh air if possible. I know I am. I'm taking almost daily walks, which is a nice change of scenery from this apartment. I am, of course, working from home as well during this, but given the nature of my job, a lot of what we were doing has been put on hold, and so I have work, but it certainly isn't enough work to be filling my normal work days. So I'm doing some additional learning, some additional professional development, doing what I can, but it's a very slow-paced time, and I'm just sort of chilling out in this apartment, drinking lots of tea here. I definitely stocked up on tea before hunkering down in my apartment, and we'll see what the next weeks and next months are going to bring, I suppose.